In 1924, in a small workshop in rural Japan, a machine did something no machine had ever done before. It stopped itself. Not because it broke, because it knew something was wrong. A single cotton thread had snapped, and it refused to keep working until a human fixed it. That loom was built by a carpenter's son, who never finished school. And the idea behind it, that a machine should stop the moment something goes wrong, would one day become the foundation of the largest car company on Earth. This is the story of how Toyota was born, and it doesn't start with a car. Sakichi Toyoda was born in 1867 in a farming village near the Pacific coast of Japan. His father was a carpenter. His mother, like most women in the village, spent her evenings weaving cloth on a wooden hand loom. Slow, exhausting, repetitive work. Sakichi watched her, and it bothered him. Japan in the 1870s was a country in a hurry. The Meiji government had thrown open the doors to Western technology after 2 centuries of isolation, and the message to every ambitious young Japanese was simple: learn, build, catch up. Sakichi took that message personally. In 1890, at the age of 23, he patented his first invention, a wooden hand loom that made weaving faster and the cloth more even. It wasn't revolutionary, but it was a start. For the next 3 decades, he did almost nothing but improve looms: steam-powered looms, circular looms, automatic looms. He failed constantly. Early ventures collapsed, investors walked away, and at one point he was pushed out of his own company. But in 1924, he and his son completed the machine that made him famous: the Type G automatic loom. The Type G could do something remarkable. If a thread broke, the loom stopped instantly, automatically on its own. One worker could now supervise dozens of machines instead of standing over a single one. The Japanese had a word for this idea: jidoka. Automation with a human touch. Remember that word, because a century later, it's still printed in Toyota's internal manuals, and it still stops assembly lines from Kentucky to Fukuoka. The Type G was so good that the British noticed. Platt Brothers of Oldham, then one of the largest textile machinery makers in the world, bought the rights to produce it. In 1929, they paid Sakichi Toyoda £100,000 for the patent. Adjusted for a century of inflation, that's millions of dollars. For a self-taught inventor from a farming village, it was a fortune. And here the story takes its famous turn. Sakichi didn't spend the money. He handed it to his son, Kichiro, a quiet, meticulous engineering graduate, with an instruction that has since become company legend: I devoted my life to the loom. You should devote yours to the automobile. Understand how insane this sounded in 1929. Japan barely had an auto industry. The streets of Tokyo were dominated by Fords and Chevrolets. General Motors and Ford both had assembly plants inside Japan, stamping out thousands of cars a year. Competing with them looked less like a business plan and more like a joke. Sakichi died the following year, in 1930. He never saw a single Toyota car, but the money and the instruction stayed. Kichiro Toyoda approached car making the way his father approached looms: take it apart, understand it, build it better. In 1933, he opened an automotive division inside the family loom company, Toyota Automatic Loom Works. His team bought American cars and did exactly what you'd expect. They tore them to pieces. The engine of their first prototype was closely based on a Chevrolet Straight 6, so closely that many Chevy parts fit it directly. The chassis borrowed from Ford. And the body was, let's say, heavily inspired by the Chrysler Airflow, the streamlined American sedan that was too radical for American buyers but looked like the future to Japanese engineers. In 1935 came the first products: the Model A1 prototype and the G1 truck. And in 1936, the car this whole episode has been building toward, The Model AA, the first production passenger car the company ever made. It had a 3.4-liter six-cylinder engine, producing about 62 horsepower. It was priced at 350 yen, deliberately a few hundred yen cheaper than the Fords and Chevrolets built in Japan. Was it original? No. Was it good? Honestly, it was decent, but that was never the point. The point was, Japan could now build its own car, and the government was about to make sure of it. New laws in 1936 heavily favored domestic manufacturers and squeezed Ford and GM out of the country. The timing for the Toyotas was perfect. One more thing about the Model AA, and this might be the strangest part of the whole story. Toyota built about 1,400 of them. And then, for decades, every single one was considered lost. Even Toyota itself doesn't own an original. The pristine car in their own museum is a replica, rebuilt from incomplete blueprints because no real AA was thought to have survived. Then, in 2008, one turned up. In a barn. In Vladivostok, Russia. A local family had been using it as a farm workhorse for decades, never knowing what it was. At some point, someone had swapped its running gear for parts from a Soviet gas truck. When the engine finally gave out in the 1990s, the car was pushed into a barn and forgotten, until a 25-year-old student stumbled onto it and made a phone call to a museum in the Netherlands. Today it sits in the Loum Museum, unrestored, dented, half Soviet, the only original Toyota Model AA on Earth. Sometimes, history survives in the strangest places. Here's a detail most people outside Japan have never heard. The family name is Toyota, with a D. The company is Toyota, with a T. That's not a typo, and it's not an accident. In 1936, the company ran a public competition for a new logo. 27,000 entries came in. The winning design used a modified name, Toyota. Why change it? 3 reasons, and they tell you everything about how this company thinks. First, written in Japanese katakana, Toyota takes exactly 8 brush strokes, and 8 is a lucky number in Japan, associated with growth and prosperity. Second, it simply sounded cleaner, sharper. And third, the most interesting one, it separated the company from the family. This would not be the Toyota family's private business. It would be something bigger. On August 28, 1937, the automotive division was spun off as an independent company, Toyota Motor Company. From 1938, Toyota barely built passenger cars at all. The military wanted trucks, and Toyota built them by the thousands, increasingly crude ones, as materials ran out. Late war trucks left the factory with wooden cabs, brakes on only one axle, and a single headlight. By 1945, Japan's economy was rubble. Toyota's main plants survived the bombing largely intact. The war ended days before a planned raid on the region. The company was alive. Barely. The years after the war nearly finished the job the war didn't. Inflation, strikes, no customers, no cash. By 1949, Toyota could not pay its workers. A bank consortium stepped in with brutal conditions, cut jobs, split the sales division into a separate company, restructure everything. Around 1,500 workers left, and Kiichiro Toyota, the founder, the man who bet his father's Loom fortune on cars, resigned as president in 1950, taking responsibility for the layoffs. He planned to return once the company recovered. He died in 1952, before he could. Just like his father, he never saw the empire his decision would create. And the recovery? It came from the last place anyone expected. In June 1950, war broke out in Korea, and the American military needed trucks, fast, built close to the front. They ordered thousands of them from Japan. Toyota's factories roared back to life. The company that had been weeks from bankruptcy suddenly had order books it couldn't fill. Toyota had survived. Now, it was going to learn how to win. A loom that stopped itself. A $100,000 bet. A copied Chevrolet engine, a lucky number 8. And a war that nearly killed the company, followed by a war that saved it. Every giant starts somewhere. Toyota started twice. But surviving is not the same as being respected. In the 1950s, made in Japan was still a punchline. And Toyota was about to build the machine that changed that. A vehicle designed for armies, adopted by farmers, and worshipped in deserts on every continent. Next episode? The Land Cruiser.